Today I'm going to be going over my plan to make the first playable alpha of viral weapons. But in order to do that, I need to get a rough idea of what...
Wait a minute, buddy.
The last thing you said was that you was gonna rewrite this whole video game in the Godot engine.
Oh, we done put one over on us again.
Oh yeah, keep waiting. Waiting for Godot. So my next goal is to have a playable alpha of viral weapons. I've been thinking about what I need to do to get there. To get a sense of that, I need to get a rough idea of what the finished game will look like. This game is heavily inspired by Slay the Spire, so looking at how much content that game has is probably a good place to start. Slay the Spire takes place over 3 acts, and then each act has 16 floors, so that's 48 in total. A floor can contain an enemy, a shop, a resting place, or a random event. There's a lot of enemy variety, and I think that's part of what makes the game so interesting. You do get the occasional repeated enemy, but mostly it's pretty varied. So I want that kind of enemy variety for viral weapons too. But that is a lot of enemies. Let's look at how many we'd need to make. Assuming 50% of encounters are enemies, 25% are random encounters, 15% safe zones, and 10% shops, if we have a similar number of encounters as a Slay the Spire run, that's 24 enemies, 12 random encounters, 7 safe zones, and 5 shops. 24 enemies, that's a lot of ships to make. What if we scale it back? How about 10 encounters per sector instead of 16? That would be 15 enemies, 7 or 8 random encounters, 4 or 5 safe zones, and 3 shops. That sounds a bit more manageable. This is all subject to change obviously, but this is what I'm going to aim for, and I have an idea of how to streamline the process a bit. In a previous devlog I showed the process of designing these ships, where I make a 3D model in Blender and use that as a guide for drawing the pixel art spaceship. Well, that's a lot, so instead I'm going to make variants. Each faction will be recognisable by their ships. This is important. When you see a Federation starship, you know it came from Starfleet, even if you hadn't seen the ship before. They share a design language. So here's the new ship from the same fleet as the other green ship. Noticeably similar, but clearly different. This one is smaller, lacks a big central laser crystal, and has no missile launchers. A much easier opponent. I didn't make a new 3D model for this one, I just adapted the existing design. Since we're going to have 3 sectors, I'm thinking each sector will get an increasingly dangerous ship from each faction. But that means if we have 15 enemies in total, 5 per sector, that means 5 factions. Here's the other faction I've made a ship for, currently called the Red Faction. Now not that one, it's just a temporary name. Actually, I'm thinking of making these the ships of the Everlasting Galactic Alliance, a faction composed of several intelligent aquatic creatures, the art for which was commissioned from the awesome Julia Minamata of the Crimson Diamond. Anyway, here's the smaller ship of that faction. It has 2 smaller ion cannons and just the 1 missile launcher, as opposed to the heavy ion cannon and 3 missile launchers of the larger one. This was also made with a similar method, just trimming down the design of the original ship and making a few design changes. I think it's still pretty clear that it's the same faction. We do also have the rat creatures. The artwork for them was created by my friend Reddy, who is also awesome. They're not going to be enemies though, they'll run the shops. Don't ask where they got that from. That still leaves 3 factions to make ships for, and view screen art for. My original thinking was that I'd commission a different artist to design each alien, so that they'd all have a unique look. I'd still like to do that, but I might draw one of them myself. If you have any suggestions on who to commission to make some cool aliens for viral weapons, let me know in the comments. So, what to make for the other factions? Well, one has to be robots, because robots are cool. Evil robots with plasma cannons are even cooler. And space monsters. I want space monsters. And finally, I haven't decided on the last faction, but feel free to throw out some ideas in the comments. So, getting back to the alpha, I want it to be the first sector of the game. So we'll need 1 enemy ship from each faction, some random encounters, a shop, some safe zones, and a system to tie all this together, like some sort of map. I don't necessarily want to make the same kind of map as Slay the Spire, I'm thinking more like FTL. Hey, if you rip off stuff from several games at once, it's less obvious. Oh yeah, and I need a progression system for upgrading the ship and adding new cards. I need to implement mechanics for more of the cards. Some sound, probably music. Am I forgetting anything? Well, let me show you what is new since the last time. I've got a new tooltip system in place now. When you hover over a system on your ship, it shows the cards that are being generated by the system. It doesn't show that for the enemy, of course, because, well, reasons. There will be other ways to look at the cards in your opponent's deck, though. The cards now appear out of the draw pile icon and disappear into the discard pile. Because of this, I swapped the position of the hero and enemy ships on the side panel. I think the flow works better this way, but let me know what you think. The draw pile and discard pile icons also bring up a list of cards in those piles when you click on them now. And the projectile icons are now appearing in the lower panels instead of in the upper panel with the ship diagram. Probably a few other changes I've forgotten, but you can see it. There's still a lot of card art to draw. But I think for the alpha, I'm just going to make some temporary program art. At least for the cards I haven't done yet. Slay the Spire did that. Some of the temporary card art they made is pretty great. The goal is to get the alpha out as soon as possible. I'm not even going to attempt an estimate on that. This project has already taken way longer than I expected. But I have a new tool to help me manage this. I've been using a program called Notion, #NotSponsored, and it's been really useful. It's like a note-taking app, but with some really good workflow and functionality. Here's my page for Fire or Weapons. I've got several to-do lists here. One for relatively small tasks, one for main features, the version of the game I want to reach, and the enemy ships. If we go down here, there's a bunch of sub-pages I've made. Some are just text, but what makes this really cool is the databases. I've made one for the cards with a bunch of customized filters and sorting so that I can view them by type or just look at all the ones I need to make card art for. Bloody hell, that's a lot. I also have one for all the weapons and systems on the ship, along with their upgrades. I'll get more into this in another video. If we go into tasks, you can look at them in these different views. You can even make notes within each task like I have here. It's just great, and I find it really helpful for productivity. It also just looks nice with all the icons and images and stuff. I think it helps when your working environment is actually nice to look at. Oh yeah, and the free version is pretty feature rich, that's what I'm using, and it seems more than adequate for purpose. If you want to see how I set all this up, then let me know, and if there's enough interest, I can do a video on it. Speaking of productivity improvements, I've been using the Pomodoro method for a while now. It's called that because of a whole thing with a tomato kitchen timer, but that doesn't matter. The idea is simply that you work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. Do that 4 times and then take a longer break. I found this really helps me avoid getting tired, and it means I can get a lot more done in the long run. I've tried a few apps and websites to track these, but the best thing I've found has been these videos on the channel Ambient Horizons. They're just Pomodoro timers, but with ambience and music from Skyrim. The music plays during the work sections and it goes quiet during the breaks, with nice audio cues when the timer transitions. If you want to use this method, I recommend putting these on a second display. They're not really distracting, and they do set a nice mood. Anyway, I've gone on for a while now, so I'll wrap up soon, but I also wanted to mention that my previous game, Guildmaster, is now on itch.io as well as Steam. I've also reduced the base price for that on each platform, so check it out. Also, there's a Fire or Weapons page on itch.io now too, if you want to check that out. Well, that's all for now. Let me know what you think of this design in the comments, and thanks for watching.